He could do whatever he wanted with me, I was at his mercy. The Dawsons wouldn't complain. Liam hadn't treated me as an outlet for his frustrations, but he was distant and cold. After the soup, the two of them headed to the bedroom. Nina sat expectantly on the bed, watching Liam as he finished getting ready. Just as he leaned down toward her, his phone rang. He answered the call, quickly dressed, and left. I wasn't surprised, he was probably going to deal with some urgent business at the company. Nina looked disappointed but smiled when he turned back. "You're wearing too much perfume." "I liked it better before," he commented before walking out the door. Nina froze, then quickly lifted her arm to sniff herself, confused when she didn't smell anything. Nina hurriedly called Mrs. Jenkins into the bedroom. "Can you smell perfume on me?" Mrs. Jenkins leaned close, sniffing Nina's arms and neck. "No, I only smell your shampoo." Nina frowned, pacing back and forth. "When you worked for Sarah, what did she smell like?" Mrs. Jenkins thought for a moment. "She didn't wear perfume. She never used any of the bottles in her cabinet. Honestly, she smelled of nothing, like she didn't care to enjoy life." Mrs. Jenkins had been hired by my mother 6 months ago, supposedly to help me with herbal broths since I hadn't conceived. I was thrilled by my parents' sudden care for me. Even though Mrs. Jenkins never cooked for me, it filled me with hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents had started to care. But I later learned that from the moment Mrs. Jenkins stepped into the house, she was part of the plan. Her real job was to observe my habits and secretly film me, so Nina could perfect her impersonation. Nina smirked at Mrs. Jenkins' remarks. Not just unlucky, she was doomed from the start. Mrs. Jenkins seemed puzzled. "Doomed?" Nina's smirk faltered for a moment before she recovered and delivered her rehearsed line. "She was always sick. The old widow who raised her was constantly begging my parents for more money to take her to the doctor. All that woman ever did was ask us for money. A beggar raising another beggar. Sarah was so pathetic, trying to do everything herself. No wonder she couldn't even manage the house staff." I lunged at Nina, throwing punches and kicks, but my fists went right through her. The Dawsons had only sent money for the first few years, and after that, Grandma Dawson paid for everything herself, collecting scraps to raise me. They only remembered me when they needed someone to take the fall. Mrs. Jenkins suggested, "Why don't you wash your hair again? Maybe it's leftover shampoo from your place that hasn't worn off yet." Sarah wasn't picky about these things. She just used whatever Hawthorne Holdings provided. She wasn't nearly as particular as you are. Nina pursed her lips, irritated. "I wash my hair every day, why isn't it gone yet?" "I'll wash it again later." Nina sent Mrs. Jenkins out of the room and then dialed a number. "Master Evans, have you trapped Sarah's ghost like you promised?" I hovered near the phone, listening to the reply on the other end. "Don't worry, I've bound her soul to the amulet. She won't even have a chance to reincarnate." I rolled my eyes as I floated around the room. Master or not, the man had no spine. He sounded more like a salesman desperate to keep his business. Liam didn't return for several days. Nina waited anxiously until 8 p.m., her favorite dishes laid out on the table. I licked my lips at the sight. It's not that Liam and I had no common ground, when it came to food, we had identical tastes. Nina picked at some vegetables and a piece of meat before setting down her fork. She was always strict about maintaining her figure. Her daily intake wouldn't even match one of my meals. Not only did she care about how food was prepared, she never ate after 6 p.m. Grandma Dawson used to say, "If you can eat, it's a blessing." I never held back at mealtime. Mrs. Collins made the best honey garlic chicken. I was practically drooling, and it hurt to think that Nina had no idea what she was missing. Liam paused, glancing at Nina. "You don't like the food?" Nina smiled sweetly. "I haven't had much of an appetite lately." Liam watched her for a long moment before replying, "The housekeeper said your appetite has been much better while I was away. Funny how it disappeared once I got home." Nina quickly shook her head. "I've been feeling a bit off, probably from the heat." Liam looked down for a second before replying, "Lightheadedness, lack of appetite, we'll have you checked out tomorrow." Nina instinctively wanted to refuse, but in the end, she smiled and agreed. She probably figured that as long as it wasn't a plastic surgeon, she had nothing to worry about. After all, only 3 people knew what really happened to me. Hawthorne Holdings owns several hospitals, and whenever I got sick, I'd go there for treatment and bill it to Liam. I was shocked when Liam went with Nina for a checkup. The doctor handed Liam the report. "Mr. Hawthorne, this is Mrs. Hawthorne's full medical report. She's in excellent health. I remember when she first came here 2 years ago, she had several vitamin deficiencies, but everything seems normal now. Looks like she's been taking her supplements regularly. Back when I first married into the family, I was constantly getting sick. The doctor recommended a full-body checkup. It turned out my poor health was due to malnutrition, so the hospital prescribed all sorts of supplements to help. But taking medicine for so long wasn't my thing, so after feeling better, I stopped. Whether the medicine had worked or not, I wasn't sure, but now they were looking at a healthy Nina, who had always been pampered and well-fed." Liam flipped through the report casually, but then his hand paused as he turned the page. I was about to float over to take a peek, but he quickly flipped to the back. After reading it, he asked, "These symptoms, aren't they usually linked to pregnancy?" I nearly choked in shock. Even though he wasn't talking about me, he knew I had always taken birth control. Besides, with my poor circulation and chronic weakness, getting pregnant was never in the cards. The doctor shook his head. "It's been a hot summer. A lot of people are feeling off. I'll prescribe some peppermint tea for Mrs. Hawthorne. She'll feel better after finishing a box." Liam stared down at the report, lost in thought.